This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. This week, I'm excited to send a big thank you to Margaret B., Storyworks Roundtable's latest sponsor. Margaret made a very kind and generous donation in support of our production, hosting, and distribution costs, and she said she's been listening to back episodes recently to motivate her to get writing again. If you benefit from this show in any way, please let us know. Kathryn, Robert, and I love hearing that what we do is helping you. And if you can make a donation in any amount, head over to storyworkspodcast.com. While I'm at it, let me also give a shout out to Goliath, one of our subscribing sponsors. I hope you enjoy this week's show, and once again, a big thank you to Margaret. Hello and welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Today, Robert, Kathryn, and I are talking about continuity. And Robert, you brought this one to the table, so I'm just going to let you introduce the topic.
Yes, not all of us write 4 books in a month, so for those that don't, maintaining continuity can be sometimes a bit of a trick. And I was just reminded of this when I was catching up with an author friend earlier on this week. And she's in the middle of a 6-book series. Well, not even in the middle. She's coming to the end of a 6-book series. She's halfway through book 5, I think, and none are published yet. But it's been a massive project and involved quite a major rewrite of book 1, and some of which I've been privy to and had some input for in one of the big turning points towards the end. And it's caused her to go back and review books 1, 2, and 3 as she's writing book 4, and found, these are some great places that I can seed things in that will then come to fruition. So it's a wonderful way to write a series. But she was also saying she was surprised at how much discontinuity there was. She didn't even realise, it's been through editors' hands, it's been through other readers, and people don't pick it up. She said at one point, and I think this was one of the books that hasn't been read through yet, she was going through book 4 as she was doing book 5 and realised that in one chapter somebody had been expelled from an academy, and the next chapter they were still there. So,
Oops.
Right. So it's not just as simple as the green eyes, blue eyes thing. Sometimes it's these glaring major mistakes because you're so immersed when you're writing.
Right.
That and you go, it'd be great to have this character come in here, and you forget that he just killed them off 3 chapters ago. So, no, I can't have them.
Right.
So I know it's kind of a more of a logistical thing necessarily, but if you don't track it, then you do become in danger of writing this absolutely magnificent, beautifully sealed off ending, and then realizing that you can't actually use that ending because of something you did in the middle of the story.
Right.
So that's why I thought, this is actually not necessarily something we talk about very often because it's assumed. But how do you track it? Do you create your own log line of? I mean, I have a character list, and I know what their attributes are. But that's probably and weaponry. I have a list of weaponry because in sci-fi world, I keep forgetting whether I call them plasma rifles or plasma guns or laser guns or whatever.
Right.
So I'll never go to my glossary again.
Yes.
Get your own work.
Yeah. I think you have to track it. I think you have to keep a Bible or manual, whichever word you like, for the project you're working on, especially when it's a series, because it does get so unwieldy to keep all of those details in mind. And I'm great at journaling in the developmental stage and storyboarding and tracking my action, but I'm terrible at taking the time to stop the flow of my work and write down this supporting character, did I describe him with black hair or brown hair? Did I make him tall or stocky? And then I'm going into my old manuscript and doing a search and trying to scan all the references to this character. And where's that first description? And when did I say this? And oh my gosh, it becomes a nightmare.
you've never done it exactly how you remember.
Right.
So you're like,
right.
you can't find it because it actually doesn't exist
Yes.
the way it is in your head. So then you're like,
Right. Yeah. You're searching for the word stocky and you described him as squat and you're never going to find stocky. You're like, right. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I've had the embarrassing, not publicly, but reading back through something and then realizing that I'd put a character in, possibly I think even on a spaceship, and in the middle of the book, this character was all the way through the book, and in the middle of the book joins the team on the spaceship and then never appears again.
Oops.
What happened? It was obviously a supporting character, so I had to do something with it. Oh, where's he going to go? I'll have to dispatch him, send him off somewhere on a mission.
Yes. Yep. Yes. Quick insert.
Sometimes those things, sometimes it's nice to have those problems sometimes because they give you some complexity and subplots or some text that you think, oh, that's right, I could use this. And you'll then have a reader say, oh, that was really clever what you did with that character. Yes, well, it's because I made a mistake in the first place.
But I caught it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
That's true.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not just character details. Skog Hall is a haunted house story, so I paid so much attention to the floor plan of this house, this old 4-square farmhouse ordered from Sears Roebuck originally. And at one point in, I don't know if it was the second book or the third book's manuscript, I think I had reversed the dining room and the kitchen, and, I had to walk through a pantry when the pantry was tucked inside the house off of the kitchen and the first floor plan. I was like, oh my God. So now all the scenes where my character is moving through the house and doing things that involve kitchen or food stuff or feeding the dog, I'm like, oh God, now I've got to go and retrace all of those scenes and make sure her, the sequencing is right and the details line up and,
right.
Which
may not seem like such a big deal. Like, you're like, oh, do I really need to go fix all this? But
yes.
Even in Robert's example of his friend with a 6-book series, right? It's taking her probably a long time to write all 6 books. It might take a reader 6 days. So they're going to remember that the kitchen and the dining room are in this order,
yes.
and
yes.
not the opposite. So that might throw them out.
Yeah, yeah, and it's the passages where you're describing the setting. It's the character's actions as she moves through the house. It's whether she walks through the pantry to get to the room or tucks into a closet. Does the pantry, if it's on the outside, it has a window. Inside, it needs a light switch. There's so many little details that it's a lot of rewriting, actually. It's a small mistake, but it's a lot of rewriting.
Yeah, and what my friend was saying as well is that she was finding that she'd have to go back and there was a particular section where it had to be put in there for it to make sense. But what was already there was so already beautifully written, polished, edited, revised twice, and now she's got to put an extra paragraph or two in and completely break it up, and it just feels really hard to do.
Destroy your prose.
You destroy your prose, yeah. So you've got to rewrite. You can't just,
yes,
insert here. You've actually got to rewrite the whole scene, which then means you've got to get yourself back in the flow of that story and what's happening with that particular point of action, which can be tough. So no wonder people procrastinate or find it a struggle.
Yes.
So what you're saying really is try not to make the mistakes in the first place, which means you need a system to keep yourself from making the mistakes. Because it is a pain to have 2 documents up and be like, okay, right, stop, record detail, but that can really save you so much work on the back end if you can catch as many of it as possible on the front.
Yeah, that's another plug for Scrivener as well. I think I will, because I separate mine all into scenes, so I'll leave scene notes in the notes section, as well as the overall synopsis in the card, and then you've got a general notes section for the overall story. So if you've got things, here's stuff I need to go back and double check. So I'll put that in the global notes and then the scene notes. And it is a bit tricky, as you say, Kathryn, to do that when you're in flow. So but you do get used to just popping out quickly and leaving a little note and then coming straight back into it. You don't want to spend too long. Because otherwise it's like going off and researching the internet, and then you come back to it and you've forgotten where you were.
Yeah, I think with my current book, which is still in longhand, but I've typed up over 200 pages, so I have to go back. I do have to go back and do this now. But here, I am pledging that I will type a chapter and then I will make my notes. I don't think I could do it like as I'm typing or as I'm writing, but I could certainly finish a chapter, then do the annotations for my reference. And that would be such a great tool for the between draft period when you're getting ready to revise, to go through and look, like in the notes in chapter 3, are the chairs in the library facing the fire or looking out the window? In chapter 6, where are they? Because if this is a central setting and the characters have, important dialogue there or important action there, if you screw it up, that's something important. It matters.
So I did this. I went back through and I found like all my descriptions and all my setting descriptions and everything. And I actually created a binder because I like writing it out. And what I found is actually the best way for me to do it was to straight copy the words that I had written in the text. Because otherwise, if you summarize it, what I found anyway was that I used like the same words too many times.
Yes.
Every time something would come back around.
Yes.
So you kind of end up with a description landed in your brain that then every time you come back around to describe that person again, you just do, right? You just describe them again in the exact same phrase, or
redundantly,
the exact same words, or the exact same.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh man. So then it was nice because then I could just look at the sheet and say, okay, so here's his actual description and here's the ways that I've described it, so that I don't have to repeat that again. Or I can pick something different, or I can change it just a little bit so that it's not redundant, or it's not, it doesn't feel like I read this just a second ago. Because again, as a reader, they're going to read it way faster than you wrote it. So.
Yeah,
that's a good point actually, because I think we've all read books like that where you keep coming across his hair was swept back into a beautiful blonde ponytail, and then 5 chapters later, his hair is swept back in a beautiful blonde ponytail.
Right,
exactly. And you already told me that. And
I know.
A lot of times for me, it happened in descriptions of settings too, right? So like you describe a certain, like the way that the keep was built, or like if you were describing your pantry.
Yes, right.
Just over and over and over again, she reached up and grabbed the pole and clicked on the light. I mean, like, okay, we get it. There's a click light in the pantry. Right. But for you, that's what sticks in your brain is as the writer.
That's the detail.
She has to turn the light on. But yeah, so like having my exact words there not only helped with continuity, but helped me with shifting around.
Yes.
That general concept.
And make it richer. Yeah, that's nice. I like that.
And when you're looking at these setting details, I think it's really helpful to think about the atmosphere of the space and what the characters are doing in it. So if if my chair is in front of the fireplace, I want their position to be consistent throughout the book, but I don't need to describe the chairs multiple times. So it's... Are we, warming by the fire? Is there a wind outside? Is light coming through leaded glass? And, does she need to have the Tiffany lamp on, or is the sunlight enough? So if you're thinking, what season is it? What time of day is it? What are we doing here? Then that helps you just naturally vary your descriptions while keeping the details continuous, maintaining continuity.
That those chairs face the fireplace and now you've walked in and she's sitting in the chair, she's probably not going to be looking out the window. Right. So then you can keep it consistent without losing or having to redescribe your room in those exact same terms. So.
Yeah, that's true. Then you can use little things to establish some of the emotional parts. So if they're having a very deep conversation, and it could be, I hated the way his face was black against the bright sun outside. I wished I could see how he's reacting to my words. That sort of thing.
Right.
So you've got the setting there that helps bring to life.
Right. And it also helps you set your stage when you think about the action that occurs there. Like this morning, the two characters were in the reading chairs, and I put a little pedestal table between the chairs, but they're close enough together that the character could reach over and touch the arm of my protagonist. And if they were facing the fireplace and sort of each angled out, to get the heat from the fire, there'd be too big of a gap. So when you build your setting for the action and the emotion you need to convey to your reader, that's really important in this scene. In a previous scene where she's reading alone, it might not matter. So I have to go back and say, did I situate the chairs the same way? Mm-hmm. And which set piece matters most. And then you've got to be consistent for that.
And also, as Kathryn said, I think to remember the reader is going through that much faster than we are as well. And so that's why it helps for you to read it as a reader later, because you'll get that, oh, hang on a minute, all of a sudden they're buttering some bread, but I never moved them out of the lounge room,
Right.
Like they've got to get into the kitchen, So,
right,
so
yes.
continuity is also, did you jump cut fast without alerting the reader to where they now are? So, and that made me think about what you were talking before about seasons and time, because that's a continuity issue as well. Especially if you're writing things which are set in certain times of year. So we talk a lot about Harry Potter, obviously, but those books are set in school years, but they also have seasons that pass, and they also have holiday times, and they have. They go through the day, they have bells that ring, and they have to get to another class. So there are a lot of things in there that if they weren't there, you'd lose the sense of forward momentum. And I know I've done that in the past, where I've had all this action happening, and I've realised, oh, hang on a minute, that's taken place in about 14 hours. It's impossible. They had to have slept. Some things had to have. Time has to pass.
Right.
Right.
And so, how do we show that? So that's another continuity issue. Is was it a week? Was it 2 days? And if you do want to leap the reader forward 4 years, how are you going to do that without disturbing them? Because there are novels that require that type of thing as well.
I'm thinking about the issue of seasons in space.
Okay.
How do you have seasons when you're in outer space, Robert? How do you keep people grounded? You don't even really have days, not the same way.
That's true.
That's right. So you have to make sure. So you might talk about standard Earth units, for example, or standard Earth days, or standard rotations, and the gravitational stuff comes in there as well. So on one of the planets, because it was a very high gravity and a very dense planet for that reason. So people often think big planets have higher gravity, higher gravitational force, but it's not necessarily the case, because they could be much less dense. So it's if they're very rich in metals, for example, then they're likely to be much more dense, more compact, smaller planets. They'll turn faster, so they have shorter days, and they also have tempestuous weather because of the higher rotation and because of the gravitational forces that are keeping the I forget what the terminology for it is, but there's a scientific term, hard science, for what keeps the atmosphere in place. Magnetosphere. And so, yes, if you can pull all that into your brain and have it as your part of your working science Bible, I suppose, then that does help add atmosphere. And in fact, I used it as a ticking clock in one of the books, because there was the regular tornadoes were sweeping across, and all the natives know that you've got to go into bunkers. There's nothing else you can do. And that's the reason why all of their buildings are single story and squat and made of stone. So, yeah, I think it's those sort of things add atmosphere. If you don't, look at our episode about balance, we're going on about it, but it shows that your character is aware of passing of time, or if they're not, some other people are that then jerks them into action. You go, oh god, yeah, okay, I've got to go and get myself safe because night is coming and the wolves are out.
Right. I wonder if like meals or like coffee or like that sort of like ritualistic thing that
routine.
You can pull in. Yeah, routines can help with that too, like the continuity across culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
that's what I loved about the
weird
Expanse.
Days, but yes, I was just thinking about that. I was like, because he always has his coffee.
And if he doesn't get it, he just goes mad.
Yeah, so when it's morning because he's drinking his coffee. So so interesting. You can play a lot with that, but you have to establish that touchstone for the reader so they do have a continuity way of measuring time or the passage of time, no matter how twisty it is.
Right. Yeah, you just made me think of Alien, the opening scene in Alien when the crew comes out of their stasis pods and then you see them around the table and they're eating breakfast, they're having their coffee and their cigarettes and, I don't know, I think there's a tub of cereal. So it's clearly breakfast and you have no sense of seasons or light or time of day, but you wake up, you eat breakfast, right? It's what you do. And so there's that normality of routine built into this very extraordinary setting.
Yeah, I was watching James Cameron's series about science fiction that's just come on our TV. And I really don't watch TV, but I saw the ad for it. I thought, oh, that's interesting. And it actually is interesting because he interviews Spielberg and Lucas and Ridley Scott and then some of the actors. And Alien was one of the ones that came up and talking about how he deliberately wanted to show an ordinary world. These are blue-collar workers. And so that breakfast setting where the team come together and it's just really ordinary and not even terribly interesting because it's just, here's our standard, boring breakfast, boring day, yet another day. It's not a gleaming starship that we often imagine. It's broken down. It's a typical poorly looked after corporate entity. So
right. And even after they get the distress signal and they go to the other planet and then there's the alien and people are dying and stuff, you still need to maintain that sense of these are ordinary people. So you have to have continuity there even as their world is blowing up in their faces of, what is who's in charge? The engine room guys are like the lowest on the totem pole, and you still have an element of normalcy, even though normalcy is out the window because they're under attack, right? And so you need that continuity of who's who, what are their roles, how do they relate to each other, how do things function in this world? So with continuity, no matter what your setting is, how fantastic it is, once you establish the world, the rules, the way things are, you have to maintain that throughout the arc.
And one big thing as well is that you just made me think about is the continuity of character, because I've read books where the character is young and gets put in a difficult situation, and then they're given a gun, and all of a sudden they can use a gun. They've never shot one before. You wouldn't. That would be scary. You'd probably miss, but all of a sudden they're a sharpshooter, and so you have to watch out for stuff like that as well, where continuity of character and their key skills, their emotionals, their emotional reactions. So that's a good point.
Yeah, I did a writing tip on continuity a while ago, and I referenced a Funny or Die, I think it was a Funny or Die skit, where, Jeremy, who's the guy who starred in Mr. Selfridge? I'm trying to look it up right now, and I'm not finding his name.
No idea.
Mr. Selfridge, it was like a PBS, BBC type of show, but so forgive me, I'm forgetting the actor's name right now. But in this Funny or Die sketch, the actor is having tea with his niece, and she asks him why he has his beard. And he says, because I'm playing Mr. Selfridge, and Mr. Selfridge has a beard. And she tells him it's stupid. And then she hits him over the head with the tea tray. And he wakes up to her with a razor coming down to shave his beard off. And he goes, continuity. So, continuity of character, right? You can't have a beard in one chapter and not in the next unless you show the character shaving. And we don't always talk about this in books, because unless it's like hardcore science or something, readers aren't necessarily calling it out. You aren't developing that club of people nitpicking every little thing. But if you look at YouTube, there are hundreds of videos that point out the errors in every movie. This coffee cup was here and then it was here, right?
I know, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That is interesting because, for example, in
Piven, Jeremy Piven. Sorry, I just wanted to get that out there. Yes. Okay.
In The Martian, it's done really well because you could have been tempted to have him, Mark Watney, be the same character at the end, in physically, but actually, this has been, a year and a half or something. It's been a long time. He's malnourished. He's got sores from being in a spacesuit in the cross country part he has to do. He's in the cross country part. Of course, he's not been able to shave, and he certainly hadn't had much brushing of teeth or anything like that. So I like the fact that when they finally rescue him, and he takes his helmet, I go, "Oof, you need a shower, man."
Right.
And so not only does he look, you can see he's got the sores and he's scratchy, and and you just, that feels yucky. And you realise, this guy's been through an ordeal.
Right.
He's wasting away, and thought that was nice. That okay, it seems obvious now, but you could have just left it as some action hero, magically propelling himself off the planet and having the beautiful Hollywood ending. But I like the fact that he suffered.
Right. That's an opportunity that continuity created, right?
Yes,
by paying attention to that, you could then turn it into something kind of magical at the end.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because that does annoy me when characters get trapped for a long period of time and none of the men grow beards. So that's what reminded me of what you were talking about.
Yes, and everybody in 1600 England has perfect teeth, and you're like, come on.
They can kiss each other without recoiling.
Yes, and their clothing is crisp and beautiful, and and
we never see the midden dump.
Right. Yeah, those are rosy, idealized portrayals of a reality that never existed. But
well, and again, those are
not really continuity, is it?
Right?
It's a continuity of setting, isn't it? I suppose it's the expectations in there. It's maybe continuity is not the right word for it, but authenticity. Which authenticity is a part of. Because you lose the authenticity of the story if all of a sudden the continuity jumps all over the place.
Well, I think that's one of those things is like, how authentic do you want to be? And then stay consistent with that. Right? So if you want to show them emptying the chamber pots out, just dumping them, right? Then you need to make the streets stink.
Yes.
Those are your opportunities that you don't want to miss, because they can add a lot of richness and texture to your setting and to your characters and to what they're dealing with. So,
yeah, and that gets into genre considerations, because in a period romance, you probably don't want people to smell and have horrible teeth.
Right. So then you just don't do that, and then keep it consistent.
Right.
And what you have never mentioned can continue to stay unmentioned.
Yes. The unmentionables.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's true. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get everyone to suspend their disbelief, because it's a fiction. So that's what we're there for. So it doesn't really matter whether it's true or not, only that the reader can suspend disbelief that's suitable for the genre and their expectations of that particular novel or story. And it's jumps in continuity or discontinuity that make us all of a sudden disbelieve things. So, and it's the story might be brilliant, but one tiny error that we've made as an author in continuity alerts the reader again that this is fiction and they've got something wrong and it's jumping out of the story. And they go, oh, really? I don't believe that.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great point, Robert, that the issue with continuity is when you mess it up, it pulls the reader right out of the story. The reader notices it and says, wait a minute, you just destroyed the fantasy I have entered, And I don't mean...
I suppose that's where it comes back to Chekhov's gun as well, that if you're going to put the gun on above the mantelpiece, then, try to use those details, because as much as the appearance of discontinuity, so, what was red and is now blue, and the reader picks that up, there's the unconscious thread there as well as, in the early days, his car was falling to pieces, but it never gets mentioned again. What a shame the author didn't use that. Where is that gun that's over the mantelpiece? Why did you mention that if it was never going to appear? So there's the lack of continuity as well. That, where I think sometimes that's what I love about revising, is you go back and you find things that you've written, you think, oh, that's good. I can just turn that into a little thing that will create an open loop for later. And it makes you look like a genius writer, but in actual fact, it was just a happy accident that you could use later on. It didn't come out in first draft.
You've taken advantage of the opportunity that you've created for yourself.
Exactly.
Good job, author.
Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.